You're listening to the Touchdown Under podcast with Jack, Emilian, Anthony, and Arif. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Touchdown Under podcast. This is episode 8. I'm Jack, your host, and as always, I'm joined by Emilian.
Hey, how's it going?
Anthony.
Good to be here.
And Arif.
Happy to be back.
Now, today is unlike any other episode we've done before. Due to coronavirus constraints, we can't be in the same place to record today's podcast, but we're going to try and get it to you in our own separate homes. To start today's podcast, of course, we have our news segment, and arguably the biggest news of the off-season was Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who signed a 10-year contract extension that, along with contract incentives, is worth a total of $503 million. The contract includes just over $63 million in guaranteed money at the point of signing, and $141 million is guaranteed in the event of injury. Boys, what does this mean for the Chiefs and for the league?
Well, I mean, it's kind of just incredible when you think about it. I mean, this is an NFL player who's had 2 full seasons in the league, as a starter, and he's already had a baseball contract. I think it's quite incredible what's happening. I think that, I've seen a lot of people say it's a team-friendly deal in the future as, the team salary caps go up. So if that is the case, it's a great deal, and, you don't let go of someone like Mahomes. You want to keep him for as long as possible.
Yeah, I think it's good for the Chiefs that they get like a 10-year deal out of him, like a season or two. It's a longer deal. Also, the fact that it's $500 million, I've never had to say that, in relation to the NFL. So it's just amazing. It's a landmark moment for the sport, I reckon.
It's really set the precedent for quarterback contracts in the future. I reckon they'll all be vying to be paid more than Mahomes has been this offseason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Arif. I feel like I don't know if we're going to see another quarterback getting paid quite like this. I mean, apart from that, what I have tended to focus on is how this impacts the rest of the Chiefs' cap space and their ability to sign other impending free agents and important pieces like, as we'll talk about a bit later on, Chris Jones. Now, in other news, 49ers running back Raheem Mostert has surprisingly requested a trade. Mostert's agent, Brett Tesler, tweeted that the trade request comes after, quote, months of unproductive talks with the 49ers on adjusting his contract. A trade would leave Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon as the feature backs in San Francisco after Matt Breida was traded to Miami earlier in the offseason. Boys, what does this mean for the 49ers?
I think they'll be fine. I think Mostert, he really stepped up last year, specifically in the playoffs. But he's 28 now, I believe, and so he really wants to cash in on his worth right now. He wants to make a bit more money. So it's normal that he requested a trade. I'm not sure where he'd go, but I think the 49ers will be just fine either way.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. That the 49ers will be fine either way where Tevin Coleman Raheem Mostert ends up here. I'm not sure where, what team is the most likely to get him in this scenario. I don't know, it's interesting to see how you mentioned, Jack, that the 49ers and Raheem Mostert had months of unproductive talks. I would have thought if they'd wanted to keep him, they would have made the time to actually sign him to a deal earlier on.
Sorry, Jack.
Sorry, if you go on.
I was just going to say, leading on to what Jack said, what Anthony said, is that it's interesting that all that Mostert really wants is just to be paid as much as Tevin Coleman. And Tevin Coleman's only being paid $4.5 million per year. So it's really not too much to ask. So it's interesting. Do they really want to keep him at all?
Well, yeah. I like what you said, Emilian, earlier is obviously Mostert really wants to cash in. And I think what they're trying to do is get that money, even though we haven't really seen enough of Mostert to be able to say that he's, worthy of more money. He obviously showed up in the playoffs, but we don't know how, sustainable his play actually is. And so I don't blame the 49ers for waiting because we really haven't, I don't think we've seen enough of him to be able to say that he definitively deserves a contract.
Yeah.
Finally, it was reported earlier this week that the Washington Redskins are considering a rebranding. After years of resistance, the team said it was launching a thorough review of their team name and logo. Sources say that the review is expected to result in a new team name and mascot. Boys, does it happen? And if it does, what does it mean for Washington and the league?
I reckon they will definitely change the name and the logo, and the mascot, all that. But I don't think they're gonna make any changes, to their uniforms or that. They'll still have that identity. They'll keep the color scheme. They'll just have to rename, I think, some like the Red Tails or the Red Spears, as we've seen on some sort of like, like fan art, stuff like that. So I mean, I don't think it's that big a deal. I think it's definitely overdue, and honestly, I'm quite excited to see what they come up with.
I'm not so optimistic, Emilian. For me, I do agree that they'll keep the same colors roughly, might change it a little bit. Just I hope that if they do rebrand, which I think they will do, they don't. I hope they are sure what they're doing. I don't want them to like change their name or their brand to something like that doesn't. I don't know. Like I've seen on social media, there's like rumored that they might be changed to the Warriors or the Redskins. I don't. For me, I like the name Redskins as like the brand that they've had. It's their historic franchise. I hope they can get the rebrand done right. I don't want them to change it to something like, I just hope they get it done the right way.
So,
if you know what I mean.
So if they were to change the name, what would you like it to be? Like, give us an example.
See, I don't think any. I think the Redskins are the best choice for their brand at the moment. I don't like any of the suggestions I've seen on social media, honestly.
I just want to say, I think out of the two, the name and the logo, I think the logo is in much more need of a change than the name. However, I still think it's important. It's been a long time coming. I reckon they need to change it to the Redskins, but I kind of see where you're coming from, Anthony.
Yeah.
I feel like it still needs to fit within their franchise and what they...
Yeah, their identity and their past.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't see the Redskins coming up with a completely different name and be able to keep that identity. I think they'll lose some of their fan base if they do change their name, which I'm concerned about.
Honestly, I feel like the main focus of the organization is actually just to get the name changed rather than what they're going to change it to. Like, it seems like it's a bit of damage control. Like, they're being pressured into this based on what's currently happening in the world. And so I feel like their focus is, let's get it changed rather than, getting too bogged down in what they're going to change it to, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'd be good if they got it right in terms of like design and name and all that kind of stuff. But, I think it's important that sooner rather than later that they do rebrand.
Sure.
Okay, so on to today's episode. And on today's episode, we have our All-AFC West and All-AFC South division teams, which we will be going through and discussing today. And starting off with our All-AFC West team, we have at quarterback none other than Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, it's a no-brainer choice. Mahomes is the best quarterback in this league. It's taken him very little time to become that. Obviously, he's already got his MVP. He's got his Super Bowl. There is no other quarterback in this division or the league who is actually better than him at this point in time.
Yeah, there is no debate as to who the best quarterback in this division is. I think a lot of people will debate, whether or not Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. For me, he is, without doubt. I think many would agree with me in saying that, actually. And it's truly incredible what he's done in only 2 years as a starter. I mean, in 2018, MVP, threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. He's one of the few quarterbacks to have ever done it. And he also led the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game despite having a terrible defense.
Yeah. So there's obviously no argument whether or not Mahomes is the best, quarterback within this division. He certainly is that. But I think the argument is whether or not he's better than Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Lamar Jackson was the MVP for the 2019 season. I think Lamar might have an edge on Patrick Mahomes here simply because of his ability to run the ball, be elusive. Also, considering that Patrick Mahomes has the two fastest players in the league, on their offense at wide receiver, that's something that Lamar Jackson doesn't have. So to compare those two And I think if Lamar Jackson had those such good like wide receiving threats that the Chiefs do, swap positions around, you'd probably find that Lamar probably would be the better quarterback. But either way, Patrick Mahomes is definitely the best quarterback in this division.
So I just want to mention, you say that if Lamar Jackson had, McCall Hardman and Tyreek Hill, the two fastest players in the league, he's already got Hollywood Brown, and the Ravens' scheme really focuses on the run. They don't really need like Tyreek Hill and McCall Hardman. They just need one. They've already got that with Marquise Brown. I don't think that the addition of more speed players would benefit Jackson all that much.
Well, I think the more threats you have, like even if you're good enough, just running the ball and then that's fine. If you have threats at running back, at tight end, at wide receiver, the more threats you have, the better your team would be, obviously. So if you have the more threats, the harder it is to contain. So I reckon having Nicole Hardman and Tyreek Hill would make Mahomes Lamar a better quarterback. So I disagree with you, Emilian.
I mean, Anthony, with your point about the more weapons, the better. The Ravens, as Emilio mentioned, they do have one of the fastest guys in the NFL in Hollywood. They also went out, got more speed at running back by drafting J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State. And they do run a different scheme, but I feel like this kind of conversation we're having kind of ties into what we've talked about in a previous episode about, I guess, the clutch gene that Mahomes has and how Lamar hasn't quite developed it yet. So I wouldn't really say that Mahomes is worse than Jackson or Jackson's better than Mahomes because he hasn't been able to perform in those important moments.
Yeah.
Back to your point, Anthony, about having other weapons. I feel like if you're a good enough quarterback with good enough traits, it doesn't really matter who's around you. You'll be able to find them with the ball. And I feel like compared to someone like Jackson, Mahomes is just like he's on another level in terms of passing. Like Jackson is not anywhere near the kind of passer that Mahomes is. Really, the only thing that Jackson has over Mahomes is the rushing ability. Although Mahomes has proven that he can tuck the ball and run and take the contact on the ground as well. So I just don't think that. I mean, it's not just a clutch gene. Like, there's a clutch gene. There's passing ability. Mahomes is better in a lot more ways. And I mean, Jackson has his weapons. Mark Ingram is a threat on the ground and in the air. They've got Hollywood Brown. You've got tight ends, Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle. I mean, he thrives in that tight end offense where, it's usually tight ends getting open. Like in that offense, Jackson isn't really forced to make really tough throws. Like usually it's the guys who are open, the RPOs. It's not really as accuracy based as Mahomes' offense in Kansas City is.
Yeah, I guess I know I'm debating that Lamar is a better quarterback, but often in my time watching the NFL, there's a lot of different factors that determine where if a quarterback's better or not. It's hard to say definitively that one is better than the other. Just that's my opinion, but I know there's a lot of different factors that come into that.
I mean, either way, Mahomes is the best quarterback in this division. So
sure.
I think we'll move on. Onto our running backs, we have Melvin Gordon from Denver and Austin Eckler from the Chargers. Gordon, I like Gordon, but the question I have is he even the best running back on his own team? You've got Philip Lindsay there as well, and they're similar. They're at a similar level. I feel like both of them in the same backfield, they might end up getting in each other's way in terms of. But Eckler, I really like. I feel like now that Gordon is permanently gone, I think he can really prove that he's the feature back, and it is his time to shine. He's really effective. He's effective on the ground, but he really thrives as an air threat as well. Obviously, I mean, he's a running back who had last season 993 receiving yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. I mean, that's incredible. So honestly, I believe there's even an argument to be made that he's the best running back in this division.
I think that there are so many good running backs in this division. I mean, you've got Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler. Obviously, as you mentioned, Jack, you got Philip Lindsay. You also have Damian Williams and Josh Jacobs. I mean, Josh Jacobs, at the age of 21, rookie season, he had over 1,000 rushing yards as a power back. That's really impressive. I think Melvin Gordon just carries a bigger name right now. I think that's why a lot of people would probably associate him as the best in this division. I honestly think that all of these running backs are more or less even. I think Melvin Gordon's more of that all-around back, be threat in the run game and the receiving game, whereas you got Austin Eckler, who's more of a threat in the receiving game. Then you got Philip Lindsay, who's more of that, elusive speed back. And then you got Josh Jacobs, which is really your heavy power back. So I think that, there's such diversity in the styles of play here. And I honestly think it's one of the best divisions for running backs.
Yeah, really interesting point you raised up, Jack, about Austin Eckler. So obviously he has 993 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns last season and 550 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Looking at the stats, it seems to be more of obviously the running back, seems to be more of a wide receiver with nearly 1,000 yards receiving is unbelievable.
So, Anthony, I think the reason for that is Eckler actually lines up out of the backfield, and usually where his receiving yards come from is either on second or third downs where, the ball is passed to him in the behind the line of scrimmage, and then he uses his feet as if he's a runner to get the receiving yards. Because if you line up Eckler as a wide receiver, there's no way he has the same impact. Because because opposing defensive backs will then actually line up on him and play on him. Whereas when he's a running back coming out of the backfield and receiving like that, he's using his running traits when he receives the ball in the backfield. He's still playing like a running back, but he's getting receiving yards, which is why he's definitely a running back for me. But if you line him up as a wide receiver, he's not going to have the same effect.
Yeah. You go for a million, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add to that, Jack. I like how you mentioned, most of Eckler's receiving yards came from him lining up in the backfield. And you also have to consider how terrible that Chargers offensive line was last year. I mean, Philip Rivers barely had any time to get rid of the ball, so he always had Eckler kind of as that safety blanket. And Eckler, capitalized on that and ran for a lot of yards, and that ended up being receiving.
Exactly, and I'm just before you get to you, Riff, I'll make a point about that when you get to the offensive line soon.
Yeah, I really do like your point there, Jack, especially since if you look at Eckler's stats, he had 92 receptions on 108 targets, and that's just clear to me that most of his receptions were just Philip Rivers just throwing it off to him and him making it happen. And he was able to do that. He had 27 broken tackles last season. So I think he's a very impressive running back, and I'm not sure. He could be better than Melvin Gordon. I'm not sure. I guess we'll wait and see what happens in Denver with him. But there's certainly a lot of talented running backs in this division.
Well, yeah, you're right, Arif. Most of his receiving yards came after the catch. Obviously, they were mainly just dump offs. I mean, you wouldn't have seen Eckler, going up for a jump ball or anything like that much. But that's a good point. On to our wide receivers now, and we have at wide receiver 1, Tyreek Hill from Kansas City, Keenan Allen from the Chargers, and Cortland Sutton from Denver. Obviously, Hill at wide receiver 1 is a no-brainer, and we know about Tyreek Hill. All I'm going to say is that Mahomes' new contract only improves his career prospects. The longer they're together, the better career he's going to have. That's really all I'm going to say about him. In terms of Allen, up to this point, Allen has definitely been the second best receiver in his division. The question now is whether he can continue to be that, but with lesser quarterback play. So he's had Philip Rivers, and now he's going to have Tyrod Taylor / Justin Herbert. So it'll be interesting to see how he adapts, how he builds chemistry, whether he keeps that wide receiver 2 mantle. And then with Sutton, obviously he's made a really great impression since coming to the league, even with subpar QB play with, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, even Drew Lock. I'm not completely sold on Drew Lock. As I'm going to say, the only question of Sutton is if Lock can be the guy and if they can build chemistry together.
Yeah, I think regarding Tyreek Hill, I think he's definitely one of the most valuable players in the league, simply because he's such a nightmare matchup for opposing defenses. Because if you take your eyes off him for just a second, you'll probably lose him, before you know it. So he is really valuable. I don't think he's the best receiver in the league, but I definitely think he brings the most to a team. It's a shame that he got injured last season. He missed 4 games, but he was only 140 receiving yards away from having his third straight 1,000-yard season. With Keenan Allen, he's been such a great and consistent receiver for the Chargers in the last 3 years. He's racked up over 1,000 yards in, each of the last 3 years. As you said, it will be interesting to see, Jack, if he can maintain that level without Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers is an excellent QB, and now we'll see if he can build chemistry with either Justin Herbert or Taylor, or whether or not he'll just decline from here. With Colin Sutton, he's such an incredible talent, and I'm happy he got a lot of recognition last year. He had over 1,000 receiving yards with Joe Flacco throwing to him for most of the season, and Flacco rarely extends plays. I mean, especially last season, he was more of a statue in the pocket, and with a terrible offensive line, that doesn't give the offense many chances at all. We saw late last season that Drew Lock likes to, extend plays a bit more and moves around in the pocket, and I liked what I saw. Hopefully that continues to improve.
Yeah, for me, obviously, Tyreek Hill is definitely the best receiver in the division. Just basically, you mentioned a million, his speed and his, elusiveness. It's so hard to contain him. We've seen it time and time again. You'll think you'll have him 1 second, and then the next second he's, broken away. He's 10 yards away. It's his speed is just what gives him his ability to be such a good wide receiver, especially with Mahomes throwing to him. And Keenan Allen, it's interesting. Obviously, as a receiver, he's really good. Has had over 1,000 yards in the last 3 seasons. I'm interested to see whether or not, you mentioned Emilian and Jack, if he can gel with Justin Herbert being the new quarterback for the Chargers, or whether or not Tyrod Taylor becomes that quarterback, the starting quarterback for the Chargers week 1. I'm not sold that, because Keenan Allen's has had Philip Rivers throwing to him for such a long time. I don't know if it'd be that easy of an adjustment for him. For me personally, I don't think he can make that adjustment that easily at all, that first season at least.
Yeah. Okay. So in regards to Tyreek Hill, I think he's probably the second most exciting player to watch behind Lamar Jackson in the league. But I think you guys really hit the nail on the head there. You need to keep your eyes on him at all time. You definitely need that safety help when it comes to Tyreek Hill, because he'll just burn all the corners in his division especially. Keenan Allen, he first lost Tyrell Williams last offseason. Then this offseason, he lost Philip Rivers. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep the same level of play that he has been over his consistent career. And Cortland Sutton has been really exciting as a second-year player. He really broke out with over 1,100 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. And it will be interesting to see the chemistry he has with Drew Lock in the future.
Our tight end is Travis Kelce from the Chiefs, and again, this is a no-brainer. Not only is he a top 3 tight end in the league, but there's obviously a case to be made that he's still the best in the league. Obviously, guys like Ertz and Kittle. I mean, I still think at this point in time he's probably the best tight end in the league.
Yeah, for me there are 4 tight ends in the league that stand out above the rest. You got George Kittle, as you said, Jack, obviously Travis Kelce, you got Rob Gronkowski there as well, and Zach Ertz. And I think that Travis Kelce is the best in the league at the moment. I think just because he's got that veteran presence and he's been in the league for so long, puts him above George Kittle, in my opinion. And we saw last year, especially in the divisional round against the Texans, how important Travis Kelce is to the Chiefs' offense. I mean, they were down 24-0, and he really showed up. He had over 100 receiving yards, and the Texans couldn't cover him. He scored 3 touchdowns on top of that. And I mean, he's been so consistent, and I enjoy watching him every time he plays.
Yeah, I really like the point you raised, Emilian, about Travis Kelce being that veteran presence for the Chiefs as opposed to George Kittle in the 49ers. He started off in his rookie season with 800 yards, and since then he's only gotten better and better. And the last season he had 1,200 receiving yards. Just shows how important he is having the experience in the league opposed to George Kittle. Also, as I mentioned with Tyreek Hill, having Patrick Mahomes throwing to him, it makes Travis Kelce that much better of a tight end. So I reckon the fact that he's in the Chiefs, he's got Patrick Mahomes throwing to him, he's been there for 6-7 seasons already. That's probably the reason why we have him at tight end in our list.
Yeah, he's undoubtedly the best tight end in the AFC, and I'm probably certain that he's the best tight end in the league as well at this point. I reckon Kittle will eventually overtake him, but for now it's Kelce, just from the ability he has to just take over games, especially in the playoffs.
On to our offensive line now, and we have Brian Bulaga from the Chargers at tackle, Richie Incognito from the Raiders at guard, Rodney Hudson, also from the Raiders at center. Lauren Duvernay-Tardif from the Chiefs at guard, and Mitchell Schwartz at tackle from Kansas City. The Chargers had a pretty porous offensive line last season, so the addition of Brian Bulaga from the Packers was a pretty important step in terms of rectifying their issues there, and it will certainly help Eckler by extension there. On to our defense now, and at defensive end, we have Joey Bosa from the Chargers, Chris Jones from the Chiefs at defensive tackle, and Frank Clark from the Chiefs as well at defensive end. Bosa has been exactly who the Chargers hoped he would be since he was drafted. The only thing he needs to really do is to stay healthy, and I think if he does, the Chargers will be able to have sustainable success. As for Chris Jones, him, Tyrann Mathieu, and Frank Clark are the anchors of that Kansas City defense, in my opinion. They've got to find a way to keep him around despite signing Mahomes at a massive contract. And obviously Clark, as I said, a real anchor of that Kansas City defense since he moved from Seattle.
Joey Bosa, for me, is one of the best defensive ends in the league without a doubt. He put up double-digit sacks every year he's been healthy. He missed a fair bit of 2018, but he still managed to get 5.5 sacks in just 7 games. And the craziest part about this is that he's still so young. I mean, he's only 24. So, I mean, he's got, I'd say another good 9 years left, to play. With Chris Jones, he's definitely the best defensive player on the Chiefs, I'd say. But with this whole contract situation now, we don't know whether or not, he'll stay with them for long, especially now that Mahomes just got the mega deal done. But he is an absolute monster once the ball is snapped. And any team's defense will significantly improve should he be traded or should he sign somewhere else next year. With Frank Clark, I think it was a great move for the Chiefs to go get him last season. I mean, he really elevated that defense that was really poor in 2018. And it really shows how much of an impact he made last year. In his first year with the Chiefs, he had 8 sacks. He forced 3 fumbles and an interception. I have no doubt he's going to get double-digit sacks once again in the next few years.
Yeah, good point you raised, Emilian, about Chris Jones and the whole Kansas City Patrick Mahomes contract situation, where he's not going to get paid the amount he's hoping for. So I anticipate that he will probably leave the Chiefs in search for more, for a better contract. So his best season was in 2018, recorded 15.5 sacks. And since then, he's tracked pretty well, but he's currently 26 and in his prime. So I would be anticipating a big contract. He'd probably move and find a big deal somewhere else in the league, as he should expect. He's not going to get that from the Chiefs. And Joey Bosa has been great for the Chargers since his rookie season in 2016. I think the best part of his game is the numbers he's put up throughout his career, recording 10 sacks in each season that he's been able to stay healthy. On top of this is his ability to remain consistent, and that's why he's such a premier defensive end in the NFL.
For sure, Anthony. I do like that point about Joey Bosa. It'll be interesting to see if he can continue to be the productive player he is, because on the other side of him is the aging Melvin Ingram. And once they don't have that pairing anymore, there's a possibility that Bosa might be double teamed and we might not be able to see the production that we're seeing at the moment. But I really hope that doesn't happen, and I hope that he stays healthy. In regards to Chris Jones, I really don't see how they'll be able to pay him money when not only do they just pay Mahomes and a huge contract, which is pretty much $50 million a year almost with his incentives, they also just recently paid Frank Clark the kind of money in the area that Chris Jones is looking for. So it'll be really difficult to have all 3 of them on the same team. And yeah, as I mentioned with Frank Clark, I mean, he's been really productive, especially towards the end of the season with Kansas City in 2019.
On to our outside linebackers now, and we have Von Miller and Bradley Chubb from the Denver Broncos. Miller is slowly getting up there in age, but the partnership between he and Chubb is still lethal. Obviously, Chubb last season had an injury-interrupted campaign, but I believe he'll continue to build in his promising rookie year in 2018, especially with obviously a fantastic mentor opposite him in Von Miller.
Yeah, for me, Von Miller He only had 8 sacks last season, but I think a big part of that was the absence of Bradley Chubb on the other side of the line. I think at Von Miller's age, he can't quite, put up those massive numbers while being the only threat on that defense. I think that, having Chubb on the other side of the line is really key for his success. And with Bradley Chubb, I mean, he had an incredible rookie season, 12 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 60 tackles. He got injured very early last season, so we haven't really been able to see much of him apart from that rookie season. But I'm sure he'll be back better than ever. And, him and Von Miller are going to continue to terrorize opposing offenses.
Yeah, the points I was going to raise, they're kind of the same for both Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. Obviously, you've said, Milling, that Bradley Chubb's game is complemented by the presence of Von Miller and vice versa. So I reckon there's a reason that on our list, they're both from, both Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are the the outside linebackers on our list. It's because they complement each other. Like without Bradley Chubb being on the offensive line, on the defensive line, Von Miller's game is it's reduced. His stat line is reduced. So I reckon them both being healthy, at least at the start of the season, will give us a hint of both how lethal they can be at their peak. Now, Von Miller, he's at 31. He's 31 years old. He's put up consistent stats. He's pretty much his entire career. So there's no reason why he'd drop off now. Just probably got to be wary that he could be entering maybe the final 3 or 4 seasons of his career.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt, or there's no real competition here apart from these 2 outside linebackers from Denver to take up these positions in our all-division team. I think Von Miller's career speaks for itself. He's been an incredible presence, but as you mentioned, Emilian, at his age, I don't think he'll be able to take on those kind of double teams he'll receive when Bradley Chubb isn't playing. So hopefully Chubb recovers well from his injury. And he only played 4 games, but he still had like a pretty good impact on his team. I mean, he had a sack, 6 quarterback hits, a forced fumble. So I'm certain that once he gets healthy, he'll be back to that above average level.
On to our inside linebackers now, and we have Corey Littleton, who is now at the Las Vegas Raiders, and Anthony Hitchens from Kansas City. Acquiring Littleton and Kwiatkowski has really bolstered the Raiders' inside linebacker corps. Littleton had success in Los Angeles with the Rams, and so there's no reason to believe he can't have success in Las Vegas with a young, promising linebacker opposite him in Kwiatkowski. Hitchens is an underrated name among a host of great Kansas City names. He's a guy who just plays his role each week, but he's still still one of those integral parts of that championship-winning defense.
Yeah, I think acquiring Littleton was the best thing the Raiders did this offseason, and I think that the Raiders' pass rush will improve this upcoming season with Cleveland Ferrell and Max Crosby entering their second year in the league. So Corey Littleton really does make this defense a lot better. With Anthony Hitchens, as you said, Jack, he's very underappreciated. He's often overlooked, and I think he's been a great asset for the Chiefs ever since he moved there from Dallas in 2018. In his first season with the Chiefs, he made a huge 135 tackles and even got a forced fumble. And I think that he's going to continue at this level.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Anthony Hitchens, right? I think the reason that I reckon he's underrated is because he's surrounded in a team that's got so much talent at so many positions. His stats over his career, if you look at the 2018 he joined the Chiefs, so he's played 2 seasons already in Kansas City. He's had the 2 best seasons of his career, statistics, according to statistics. So that just proves that he is a really good player, just underrated, in that team.
I agree with your points about Hitchens, guys. Just in regards to Littleton, he's really a do-it-all linebacker. As we know, he's well known for his punt blocking ability. He's a really good special teams player, and barring returners, I reckon he's the best special teamer in the NFL.
Big call. On to our defensive backs now, and we have AJ Boye, who is now at the Broncos, and Chris Harris Jr., who was at the Broncos and is now at the Chargers. So I really love this addition in Boye for the Broncos after losing Chris Harris in the offseason. In fact, I really think it's an upgrade. Boye was super consistent in Jacksonville and should look even better in Denver with better defensive talent around him. As for Harris, as with Boye, I love this acquisition for the Chargers. Not only is their defensive line lethal, but their secondary might be even more confronting. And I think the defense will be the reason for any success the Chargers have this season. Harris was the epitomization of reliability in Denver, and so there's no reason for me to believe he won't be the same in Los Angeles.
Yeah, AJ Boye. I mean, he hasn't played as well in the last 2 years as he did in the earlier stages of his career, as well as, that incredible 2017 season. But it's still a huge acquisition for the Broncos. I agree, Jack. I think it's an upgrade over Chris Harris, and their secondary is definitely improved by the signing of him. With Chris Harris, I mean, he spent the entirety of his 9-year career with the Broncos, so it's a huge move for him to go to the Chargers. But I think he just makes that defense even scarier. I mean, he joins a secondary that already consists of Derwin James and Casey Hayward. So he'll be able to play at, I think he'll be able to play at the high standard that we're used to.
Yeah, so AJ Boye the last 2 seasons obviously hasn't had as good of a season as he had earlier in his career. He's 28. I think moving to Denver is the best thing he could have done, or at least moving to another team is the best thing he could have done. He has an opportunity to rejuvenate his career, a different environment, different players. He's in a more talented defense now. I think he has another shot to rejuvenate his career and prove that he is a good cornerback and worthy of getting a bigger contract laid down the track.
That's a great point, Anthony. Especially since what happened last time. He moved teams from Houston to Jacksonville. In his first season in Jacksonville, he had 6 interceptions. So I think the best move for him at this stage of his career is obviously to move to another team, and he's done that. And hopefully he can play at that 2017 level. In regards to Chris Harris, he's been a very durable player over his career, only missing 5 games. So I hope that he stays healthy and continues to perform at a great level.
Now on to our 2 safeties. And at free safety, we have Justin Simmons from Denver. And at strong safety, we have Tyrann Mathieu from Kansas City. Simmons has improved each year he's been in the league. He's certainly climbing the ranks now in terms of free safeties in this league. And with the defensive talent around him in Denver, I feel like he'll continue to get better. As for Mathieu, obviously, as I mentioned before, he's one of those anchors of that Kansas City defense, and he was integral to their title win last season. And honestly, I think he's one of the best free agent acquisitions in the last decade. I think the impact he's had on Kansas City since coming, I really think it's been one of, if not the best, honestly, free agent signing of at least the last few seasons, if not the last decade.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree with your point, Jack, that Justin Simmons constantly improving, slowly establishing himself as one of the better safeties in the league. And you alluded to it before. You've got the return of Bradley Chubb and the addition of AJ Boye on the Broncos defense. I really think Justin Simmons is set for his best season yet. I mean, as you said with Tyrann Mathieu as well, I think really if there's one player, to be the reason for the Chiefs being much better on defense last year than they were in 2018, I think it'd be Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, he made an immediate impact on the team. He got 4 interceptions over the season, 75 tackles and 2 sacks. He's a cornerstone of that Chiefs defense, and hopefully he'll keep playing at the standard for many years to come.
Yeah, exactly. I think getting Tyrann Mathieu was just really good addition for the Chiefs game from the Texans, obviously. Emilian, I mentioned before as well about having Von Miller and Bradley Chubb returning as a duo for the Broncos, if they can remain healthy. I reckon having those 2 as a presence on the defensive line will obviously, of course, it will help Justin Simmons, have his best season yet, I reckon. There's no reason why, based off the success he's had last season and the season before, why he can't improve off that.
Yeah, he's been playing at a really high level. He had the most passes defense for a safety in the league with 15 in 2019, and obviously added 4 interceptions. So he's a great asset to that secondary. And now he gets to play with AJ Boye. In regards to Mathieu, he really lifts the performance of players around him as well. There are a lot of question marks when Andy Reid started a rookie at free safety, Juan Thornhill, but his game was amazing. I think that kind of has to do with Matthew and how he lifts the performance of players around him.
I agree, Riff. Now, on to our special teams before we wrap up the All-AFC West. We have at kicker Harrison Butker from the Chiefs, AJ Cole III from the Raiders. At punter and at kicker returner, we have Mecole Hardman from Kansas City. That wraps up our All-AFC West team.